Welcome to the Texas Convention, birth of a republic. It is March 1836, and Texas stands at a crossroads. Anglo-Texians and Spanish-speaking Tejanos find themselves increasingly at odds with the central government of Mexico. General Santa Anna has suspended the Mexican Constitution of 1824 and replaced it with a despotic, centralized regime with himself as its oppressive head. Stephen F. Austin, a leader among the Anglo colonists, has earlier traveled to Mexico City to speak with Santa Anna. Santa Anna not only declined to meet with him, he threw Austin in jail without charges or trial. Local garrisons of Mexican soldiers have been ordered to disarm the increasingly dissatisfied and unruly citizens of Texas. The Texians are retaliating. There has been fighting at Velasco, Gonzales, Concepcion, and finally at Bexar itself. Attempts to establish a democratic government for Texas have been beset with difficulty. Conservative Texians and Tejanos desire the restoration of the Mexican Constitution of 1824. However, recently arrived Anglo settlers want more, complete independence from Mexico. With rebellion rising, Texans consult together and form a provisional government of a governor and a general council. But the members of this provisional government quarrel and vacillate. In a new Texas, there is uncertainty on just what Texians are fighting for. General Santa Anna has mobilized a vast army in Mexico, and at his command has marched into Texas. He brought the full military might of Mexico to crush the rebels and to stamp out every trace of Texian resistance. He means to put to death any and all rebellious citizens wherever his army finds them. Spanish Tejanos find themselves in a difficult position. They abhor the cruelty of Santa Anna. They long for their former representative government. But Santa Anna had ruthlessly put down insurrection in Texas before. They know that if they participate in the revolt or even help the revolutionaries by supplying them, they will forfeit their property, their very lives, if the revolt collapses. As this turmoil grips Texas, a convention of representatives from the various settlements, as well as from volunteers in the Texas Army, is called to meet here in Washington in early March 1836 to form a new government for Texas. The delegates likewise know that if Texas does not prevail in the field in his desperate struggle against Santa Anna's army, all of them will likely be captured and executed as rebels. They meet in a small, unfinished wooden building without windows, knowing that at any moment the Mexican army may overtake them. Our events begin on the morning of March 1st, 1836, with James Collingsworth calling the convention to order.
Gentlemen, in accordance with an ordinance passed by the General Council on the 11th of December AD 1835 for the purpose of electing delegates to a convention to be held in the town of Washington on the first day of March ensuing, to be clothed with unlimited powers as to the form of government to be adopted. I believe we have a quorum of the delegates elected. I move that Mr. Richard Ellis serve this convention as chairman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I pray that I may be worthy of your approbation. Now, let us come to order. Delegates all, we meet at a momentous occasion. We have much to do and but little time. I cannot but say to you how important it is that within these close walls, we create for Texas a government and establish a coherent, legitimate authority here in Texas. Gentlemen, the invading tyrant's foot is already upon our soil and threatens to sweep us all away before his mercenary army. Then let us apply ourselves to the important task at hand and do our duty for the people of Texas.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lorenzo de Zavala.
Mr. Children's of Milam has been examined a draft of a Declaration of Independence of Texas from Mexico. I believe that my fellow delegates will suffer me to say that there is no more important or pressing matter upon these conventions. Therefore, I move that you, as President, select a committee of 5 delegates to prepare such a Declaration of Independence.
I agree. This matter must be resolved as soon as possible. So let us put it to the delegates. As many as are of the opinion that the President appoint a committee of 5 delegates to draft the Declaration of Independence, say aye!
At 9 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd of March, the delegates take their places again and are called to order.
Gentlemen, let us come to order. The chair recognizes Mr. de Zavala of Harrisburg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Childress, this committee has provided us with a Declaration of Independence severing our association with Mexico and declaring Texas to be independent.
Independence!
May Mr. Collingsworth and I be permitted to read the Declaration to the Convention?
You may, sirs.
Gentlemen, when a government has ceased to protect the lives, the liberty, and the property of the people from whom its legitimate powers are derived, when the whole nature of their government has been forcibly changed to a consolidated, central military despotism in which every interest is disregarded but that of the army and the priesthood. When in consequence of such acts on the part of the government, anarchy prevails and civil society is dissolved into its original elements. In such a crisis, the first law of nature is the inherent and inalienable right of the people to take their political affairs into their own hands. And enjoin it as a right and sacred obligation to abolish such a government and create another in its stead. Thank you, my friend. Gives me great pleasure to read from our declaration. The Mexican government invited the Anglo-American population of Texas to colonize its wilderness under the pledged faith of a written constitution, that they should continue to enjoy that constitutional liberty and republican government. This expectation, they have been cruelly disappointed in the changes made by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, who now offers us the cruel alternative of abandon our homes or submit to the of the sword and the priesthood. It has incarcerated in a dungeon for a long time one of our citizens for no other cause than a zealous endeavor to procure the acceptance of our Constitution. It has failed and refused to secure, on the basis, the right of trial by jury, which is the only safe guarantee for life, liberty, and property of the citizen. It has dissolved by force of arms the state of Congress, Texas, co-eon, and obliged our representatives to fly for their lives from the seat of government. It denies us the right of worshiping the Almighty according to the dictates of our own conscience, and instead offers us only a national religion. It has demanded that we deliver up our arms, which are essential to our defense, the rightful property of free men, and formidable only to a tyrannical government. It has invaded our country both by land and sea, with intent to lay waste our territory and drive us from our homes, and has now a large mercenary army advancing to carry on against us a war of extermination. Senor de Zavala. Thank you, Mr. Collingsworth. the delegates with plenary powers of the people of Texas in solemn convention assembled do hereby resolve and declare that our political connection with the Mexican nation has forever ended. And that the people of Texas do now constitute a free, sovereign, and independent republic. And we fearlessly and confidently commit the issue to the supreme arbiter of the destinies of nations.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Is there a motion that the declaration be engrossed and signed by this convention?
Mr. President, with your permission.
As many as are of the opinion that the declaration be engrossed and signed by this convention, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. The Declaration of Independence, as reported by the Committee of the Whole House, is adopted.
Mr. President,
Mr. Potter of Nacogdoches.
now that a Declaration of Independence has been approved, I move that we form a committee for the purpose of drafting the Constitution for our glorious republic. But this, I hold, is a larger and weightier undertaking than the Declaration of Independence. Therefore, I move that we appoint a committee consisting of one delegate from each municipality represented here at the convention for the purpose of drafting a Constitution for Texas.
As many as are of the opinion that the President appoint one delegate from each municipality to draft the Texas Constitution as proposed by Mr. Potter, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. Mr. Potter's motion is adopted. I shall appoint one delegate from each municipality to serve. Gentlemen, the tyrant's army is almost upon us. I suggest we commence this evening.
On this same day, Refugio Delegate Sam Houston wrote the following message from the convention to the people of Texas.
War is raging on the frontier. Beja is besieged by 2,000 or more of the Mexicans under General Sesma. And more Mexicans are on the march to unite with the besieging Mexican army. At last report, our force at Beja numbered only 150 men. Texians must rally to the support of the army, or it will surely perish. Let the citizens of the East march to the combat. The enemy must be driven from our soil, else desolation will accompany their march upon us. Every citizen must take to the spurs and ride to the west to meet the enemy where he's to be found. Independence has been declared. It must be maintained. Immediate action combined with valor can alone achieve this great work. The services of all are required immediately in the field. Sam Houston, Commander-in-Chief of the Army.
It is now the morning of the third day of March and the third day of the convention.
Gentlemen, yesterday evening an express arrived from Colonel Travis in the Alamo. He states that on the 25th a demonstration was made upon the Alamo by a party of about 300 men who, under the cover of some old houses, were able to approach within 80 yards of the fort. They were beaten back with some loss, and amidst the engagement, some Texian soldiers set fire to and destroyed the old houses. Only 3 Texians were wounded, none killed.
What about our meeting Goliad?
As we understand, Colonel Fannin is marching 300 men from Goliad to the aid of Colonel Travis and his men, and there are other forces known to be on their way. Colonel Travis should soon have some 600 to 700 men at the fort. Having the advantage of defending a well-fortified position, These should be able to withstand the Mexican forces arrayed against them.
Mr. President, have we any real assurance that Colonel Fannin is indeed going to reinforce Travis at the Alamo?
Well, as some of you know, I instructed Colonel Travis not to defend the Alamo, but to abandon it and unite with our other forces. Well, now he's hemmed up in there. And unless reinforced, mark my words, gentlemen, his command may be overwhelmed.
With all respect, General Houston, how can you suggest that Colonel Travis is acting unadvisedly and against his orders? By standing his ground at Bayard de San Antonio, he is holding most of the invading army at the frontier, who would otherwise now be sacking our settlements and butchering our citizenry.
Mr. Potter, I have never called Colonel Travis's judgment, nor his courage in the
Gentlemen!
I believe the question now is not what Colonel Travis should have done, but what we can do now to provide the aid that is necessary to give him and his men a cause to fight for, and to form a government which has the authority to establish order in this republic. A republic which Colonel Travis and his men are defending with their lives at this moment.
Mr. President.
Mr. Houston.
Mr. President, with your permission, I'd like to read a number of dispatches more recently received from Colonel Travis at the Alamo. The dispatch from Colonel Travis reads as follows. Let the convention go on and declare independence, and then we will understand, and the world will understand just what we are fighting for. Yeah. If independence is not declared, then I shall lay down my arms, and so will the men under my command. But under a flag of independence, we are prepared to hazard our lives 100 times a day and drive away the monster who is fighting under a blood-red flag, threatening to murder all prisoners and make of Texas a waste desert. If my countrymen do not come to my relief, I am prepared to peril in defense of this place. And my bones shall reproach my country for her neglect.
Mr. President,
Mr. Collingsworth.
Mr. President, I resolve that Mr. Sam Houston be elected Commander of the Texas Army until a President or Chief Magistrate of the Republic shall have been elected.
Are there any delegates who wish to state another opinion?
I do, sir. I wish to express my concern that we not confer such sweeping powers on any one man for an indefinite time. I know Mr. Houston to be an able commander and a man of indisputable character. However, should we assign command of all of our forces to any one man, however deserving, for an indefinite period, we are already facing a general made dictator of Mexico for who knows how long.
Mr. Potter, are you comparing our Mr. Sam Houston to that tyrant Santa Anna?
Easy now, Mr. Collingsworth. I'm sure Mr. Potter meant nothing of the kind.
Gentlemen, please! Who knows how long these troubles will last? Who can say how long it will take to quench the lust and greed of these tyrants and his dead army, which threatens us? If we agree that General Houston is the man to lead our army, then let us appoint him to do so until such time that we may hold the orderly elections of our citizens to fill the positions of our government.
As many as are of the opinion that Samuel Houston be appointed Major General in supreme command of the Army to hold this office until general elections may be held, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no.
The action begins again on March 6th with the arrival by horseback of a dispatch from Colonel Travis at the Alamo.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Houston, would you read the dispatch
Commander of the Alamo, March 3rd, 1836. Sir, in the present confusion of the political authorities of the country, and in the absence of the Commander-in-Chief, I beg leave to communicate the 25th last to the present date. The enemy have kept up a bombardment of 2 howitzers and a heavy cannonade of 3 long 9-pounders. They have been busily encircling us with entrenched encampments on all sides. Over 200 shells have fallen within our works without injuring a single man, and we have killed many of the enemy. We have contended for 10 days with an enemy whose numbers are variously estimated at between 1,500 and 6,000 men. Reinforcements of about 1,000 Mexicans are now entering Beja, and I think it more than probable that Santa Anna is now in town from the rejoicing we hear. I look to the colonies alone for aid, and if it does not come soon, well, I shall have to fight the enemy on his own terms. I will, however, do the best I can under the circumstances. If the power of Santa Anna is to be met here or in the colonies, then we better meet it here, rather than suffer a war of devastation to rage among our settlements. A blood-red flag now waves from the church at Beja and in the camp above us, in token that this war is a war of vengeance against rebels. They have declared as such, and demanded that the garrison should surrender or be put to the sword. Their threats have no effect on me or my men, but to make all fight with desperation and with the courage that characterizes the patriot who is willing to die in defense of his country's liberty and his own honor. God and Texas, victory or death. Your obedient servant, W. Barrett Travis, Lieutenant Colonel Commanding.
Victory or death!
Mr. Houston, President, this latest communication places me in a most delicate position as Commander-in-Chief of your army. I feel my place is no longer here. May I have permission to address the delegates directly? Please do so, gentlemen. In the present state, I feel my place is with the army and not here at this convention. May I ask that fortune favor your brave efforts as I depart for the army, and that Providence guides you in steering our little ship of state on its safest and surest course. Remember what Colonel Travis has told us. God and Texas. Victory or death! Yeah!
Mr. Potter. Mr. President, and delegates all, the safety of our country is threatened. It is the duty of all of us to hasten to the field. Therefore, I move that the members of this government, in the present emergency, adjourn to meet in the camps of our countrymen, and there or elsewhere to complete the business of this convention.
But the convention voted not to adjourn, but to continue hammering out a constitution for Texas in spite of the imminent danger of the Mexican army swooping down on them. Had they adjourned, Houston might still have won at San Jacinto, but subsequent events might have turned out very differently. Without a government, it is possible that the army might have dissolved, or even worse, mutinied for the land grants they felt they were entitled to. De Zavala and the Tejanos might have given up on the Texians and tried to rally with Mexican liberals to overthrow Santa Anna. He might have succeeded. In any case, independent Texas could not have stood long without a government. March 11th.
So, Mr. President. Mr. Potter. Mr. President, and delegates all, I would like to suggest an amendment to the second section of the ordinance forming our military force. I believe that having white men serving in the same companies as Mexicans will be deleterious to their fighting spirit and may lead to clashes over the election of officers. Therefore, I propose the following addition to the second section. Make it in separate columns the names of Mexicans within the municipalities of Nacogdoches, Bayhall, and Refugio, and San Patricio.
Mr. Potter has proposed an amendment to the second section of the defense order, which separates white men from Mexicans in the militia roll. Are there any delegates who wish to state another opinion?
Yes, Mr. President, I do. Mr. President, I do not support this amendment. Mark my words, it will be perceived by our Tejano brethren as diminishing the value that we place on their service under arms. And this is not so. Considering the source of this amendment, it may cause our Spanish-speaking citizens to question whether they'll be treated fairly by our new government once the foreign tyrant has been driven from our land. We cannot afford to lose the services of any of our citizens.
Does any delegate wish to state another opinion? As many as are of the opinion that Mr. Potter's amendment be added to the defense ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no.
That the Spanish-speaking soldiers in the Texas Army should have been proposed to be segregated from the Anglo ones seems remarkable to us today. But there were practical reasons for this. Every soldier needed to hear commands in a language he understood. There had been friction between Tejanos and Anglo volunteers, and this could be prevented by segregating them. On this day, the convention resolved that a single star of 5 points be adopted as the peculiar emblem of this republic. Thus, Texas became the Lone Star Republic, and later the Lone Star State. Today, we take for granted the image of Texas as the Lone Star, but it was within these walls that Texas officially adopted the single 5-pointed star as its symbol. During the next 2 days, with no news from Travis in the Alamo, the delegates continued to work through the night on the details of government. Tension was building over the fate of Travis and his men at the Alamo. News finally arrived at 7:30 the evening on the 15th of March.
Mr. President, dispatch, Sam Houston.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, the latest dispatch has arrived from General Houston. The Alamo has fallen.
But what of the fate of Colonel Travis?
Let me read you General Houston's message. Sir, this afternoon the following was received through a Mexican supposed to be friendly. On Sunday the 6th, the Alamo was attacked at the dawn of day by about 2,500 men and was carried a short time later, just before sunrise, with a loss of 520 Mexican killed and as many wounded. Colonel Travis had only 150 effective men out of his whole force of 187. After the fort was carried, 7 men surrendered and called for General Santa Anna and quartered. They were murdered by his order. Colonel Bowie, who was sick in his bed, was also murdered. The bodies of the Americans were burned after the massacre. in alternate layers of wood and bodies. Lieutenant Dickinson, who had a wife and child in the fort, after having fought with desperate courage, tied his child to his back and leaped from the top of a two-story building. Both were killed by the fall. I have but little doubt that the Alamo has fallen. Sam Houston.
The news of the fall of the Alamo hung like an ominous cloud over the convention during its final 2 days. The delegates knew that Santa Anna's army could arrive at any moment. The Constitution was adopted. A new government was organized. David Burnett was elected the first president of the new Republic of Texas. Lorenzo de Zavala was elected its vice president. The officers of the new republic were sworn in at 4 in the morning on March 17th. There were alarms that hostile soldiers were near. Patrols were sent out to give last-minute warning to the arrival of Mexican troops. The convention reconvened at 9 o'clock in the morning. It is likely that many of the delegates did not sleep at all during the previous night. March 17th.
Gentlemen, we have received reliable reports that the Mexican army is a mere 60 miles from here. Several of our delegates have already departed to see the safety of their family or to join our army. Let us wish the new government every success in their deliberations.
Mr. President,
Mr. Collingsworth.
Mr. President, I feel our work is finished here. We have declared our independence, created a constitution, and voted in a government pro tempore. The Mexican army may be here at any moment. Therefore, I move that this convention adjourn. Well put, Mr. Collingsworth.
Yes. Okay, it's done.
Mr. Collingsworth has moved that this convention be adjourned. And I think it's high time we did so. Are there any delegates who wish to state another opinion? Let us proceed. All for adjournment, say aye. Aye. As many as are contrary opinion, say no. The motion to adjourn this convention is approved. Done in convention at Washington on the 17th day of March, Anno Domini 1836, in the first year of independence of the Republic of Texas.
And so ended the 17 days of the Texas Convention. Less than a month later, Houston's Texas Army surprised Santa Anna at San Jacinto in the late afternoon, killing or capturing hundreds of Mexican soldiers. Santa Anna was himself captured. Houston spared Santa Anna, using him to persuade Mexico to call off any further attempts at the armed subjugation of Texas. Houston proved to be the most long-lived of the delegates. Lorenzo de Zavala continued to serve as the vice president of the Republic of Texas until he and President Burnett resigned in October 1836. De Zavala died that November and is buried in his family cemetery near the San Jacinto battlefield. James Collingsworth rejoined Sam Houston and served as a major and as Houston's aide-de-camp through the San Jacinto campaign. He was acting Secretary of State for a month. Then he was sent to the United States to meet with President Andrew Jackson. Collingsworth served as a senator and then as Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court. In 1838, while a candidate for the presidency of this republic, Collingsworth committed suicide by jumping off a boat into Galveston Bay. Robert Potter served the new republic as senator, Secretary of the Navy, and commander of the Port of Galveston. He was murdered by a gang of ruffians he attempted to bring to justice in March 1842. Richard Ellis served the Republic of Texas as a senator from 1836 through 1840. He died in December 1846 when his clothing caught fire. Many of the cornerstones of modern Texas were laid 180 years ago right here. Thank you all for sharing with us our commemoration of those historic days, the Texas Convention of March 1836.